Hey guys, welcome to Wrestling Days and welcome to this Who Should the Fiend Feud With video. I've been thinking a lot about this subject. Obviously the Fiend came back and he attacked Finn Balor. The reason for that was because Bray Wyatt and Finn Balor had a feud that never got completed. It never got finished. There was unfinished business. So the Fiend finished it. So that got me thinking about other people that had wronged Bray Wyatt or cheated Bray Wyatt, that the Fiend might now want to get revenge against. And I've got 10 names here that need to be very concerned because the Fiend might come after them next. Let's start this list, shall we, with a bit of a surprise name. That name is Chad Gable. Now, the very first championship that Bray Wyatt won on the main roster was the SmackDown Live Tag Team Championship. He won it with Randy Orton, but they lost those titles to American Alpha, and really it was from that point that the second version of the Wyatt family, which was Harper, Orton, and Bray Wyatt, it was at that point that they started to break apart. It was at that point that Harper and Orton finally snapped and they turned on each other. Obviously, you fast forward a few months and Orton then turns on Bray Wyatt as well. Whilst those championships were around the waists of the Wyatt family, everything was under control. But as soon as they lost it to American Alpha, it all fell apart. So, obviously the Fiend isn't going to go after Jason Jordan, but the Fiend could have a grudge against Chad Gable. Chad Gable is responsible for taking the first main roster championship away from Bray Wyatt. Moving on, we've got Samoa Joe. Maybe another surprising name. But what happened here was Bray Wyatt was champion, WWE champion. He lost the title to Randy Orton. He was then meant to get a rematch for the title, but he got moved over to Raw, and he still had his match against Randy Orton. It was the House of Horrors match, but no longer was it for the championship. In fact, Bray Wyatt won that match, so Bray Wyatt would have regained the championship. So, yeah, kind of crazy to think that he was denied that. So he went over to Raw, and he did get title opportunities. His best title opportunity was a fatal five-way, and the winner would go on to Great Balls of Fire to have a shot at the Universal Championship. That match was won by Samoa Joe. So you could say that Samoa Joe prevented Bray Wyatt from getting a shot at the Universal Championship. And this was not long after he had just been denied his rematch for the WWE Championship. So I should imagine he would be pretty bitter about that. Moving on, though, we've got to talk about Shane McMahon for the same reason. Because Shane McMahon was commissioner when Bray was switched from SmackDown to Raw, and again, when he moved to Raw, he was denied that championship rematch, and you could say that that is down to Shane McMahon. Shane McMahon was the commissioner of SmackDown. He will have okayed the transfer of Bray Wyatt. He will have okayed the fact that his rematch was now no longer for the championship. So he cheated Bray Wyatt out of his WWE Championship rematch and then put him onto a different show. So I should imagine that Shane McMahon is very high on the list of people that the Fiend wants revenge against. Moving on, we've got Vince McMahon. We've seen the Fiend take out previous Raw general managers. I think that Baron Corbin could also be taken out, attacked very soon for the same reason. I'm not sure if that will lead to a feud or not, but it seems like legends, authority figures seem to be on a bit of a hit list for the Fiend. So surely that brings into play the biggest authority figure there is, arguably the biggest legend that there is, Vince McMahon. Could you imagine Vince McMahon cutting a promo in the ring and the lights slowly shut down and the Fiend attacks, mandible claw, Vince goes down? It would be absolutely incredible. We already know that Bray Wyatt sees Vince McMahon as the devil because of the devil Vince puppet that we get in the Firefly Funhouse. So clearly he doesn't have the best impression of Vince McMahon. So yeah, that could be a very, very interesting one. Next on the list, we've got Braun Strowman. Braun Strowman obviously was brought in as a part of the Wyatt family. And then in 2016, he was moved over to Raw. He was like drafted over to Raw. Not really his fault, but he didn't really put up much of a fight either. He just went. And I know that Bray Wyatt took that very personal. He actually stood in the ring with Braun just before Survivor Series a few years ago and said that he had abandoned his brothers. He had abandoned Bray Wyatt. There was definitely bitter feelings towards Braun a few years ago. I can't imagine that they've mellowed. And obviously, Braun seems to be someone that's still on the Fiend's radar, because at Hell in the Cell, it will be the Fiend against either Seth Rollins or Braun Strowman. We could get that match sooner rather than later. Moving on, we've got Harper. This is a little bit of a no-brainer. Luke Harper used to be in the Wyatt family, was a brother of Bray Wyatt's, but he turned. He turned against Randy Orton. He could see that Randy Orton was no good, so he turned on Randy Orton. But then, as a result, that meant that he was then in a bit of a feud with Bray Wyatt. The two of them come into blows. And in fact, in a weird kind of turnaround, just after Bray Wyatt had lost his championship, there was a tag match that was Randy Orton and Luke Harper against Bray Wyatt and Eric Rowan. For some reason, Luke Harper sided with Randy Orton. And that surely will not be forgotten. The fact that Harper turned his back on Bray Wyatt. Right, we're getting down to some juicy ones now. How about The Rock? The Rock at WrestleMania 32 embarrassed. Absolutely embarrassed Bray Wyatt. Cut this vicious promo on him. I think he said he's not the eater of worlds, he's the eater of hot pockets, kind of making out that he was a little bit plump. And yeah, he just really ripped him apart. And it was a bit of an embarrassment, and Bray Wyatt even forgave The Rock on Twitter for embarrassing him in front of such a large audience. But I don't think he's really forgiven him, or Bray Wyatt, Funhouse Bray might have, but I don't think The Fiend has. So we could get a great little moment with The Fiend and The Rock, if The Rock ever returns. Moving on, we've got John Cena. John Cena gave Bray Wyatt his first pinfall defeat at WrestleMania 30. A lot of people thought that Bray Wyatt was going to actually win that match. A lot of people thought this was going to be a crowning moment for Bray, but he came up short. You know, John Cena getting the victory there. And that was a big, big loss for Bray. As we said, you know, his first pinfall defeat. And you could argue that really his career went kind of down after that point. Like, he really was being built up, and then Cena beat him. And then he kind of stumbled around for a little bit. He had big, high-profile matches. And, of course, 3 years later, he would be WWE champion. But I really think that stopped his momentum. It stopped his upward trajectory. And, yeah, I think Cena's got a price to pay for that. Moving on, we've got the dead man, The Undertaker. Undertaker beat Bray Wyatt at WrestleMania 31. And again, another shock. Didn't know if this was going to be the passing of the torch. Bray Wyatt calling himself the new face of fear. Well, he lost to The Undertaker at WrestleMania. He would lose to him as well in a tag match at Survivor Series. It's very hard to call yourself the new face of fear if you can't beat the old face of fear. So I feel like The Undertaker is due a visit as well. But that brings us to number 1 on the list. And of course, this is no surprise. Number 1, the person that took the WWE Championship away from Bray Wyatt. The person that burned the Wyatt compound down to the ground. The person that split up and destroyed the Wyatt family from the inside. Randy Orton. Randy Orton has got to be not only number 1, it's just an absolute shoo-in. It's an absolute guarantee. The Fiend is coming for you. Sleep with both eyes open because the Fiend will pay you a visit. I have never been more certain of anything in my life. Just because of the absolute pain and destruction that Randy Orton caused. In fact, there's a theory that the Fiend could win the Universal Championship soon. Randy Orton could beat Kofi Kingston, and then we could get Bray Wyatt versus Randy Orton at Survivor Series. How epic would that be? There's certainly many other names that could be added to this list. We could talk about Rowan, we could talk about Daniel Bryan, but I just felt like these 10 were maybe a little bit higher on the list. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. If you enjoyed the video, give it a like, hit the subscribe if you haven't already, and hopefully I'll see you again next time. Bye for now.